I was getting ready to sleep when I received the call. It was from a no-caller ID. I sat there at the edge of the bed, phone to my ear. Hello. I could hear someone clearing their throat from the other end of the line. And then a deep, formal voice piped up. Good evening. Am I speaking to Alex Adeyemi? You are, I answered. Who's this? I was up to my neck in cold calls from strangers who wanted to sell me car insurance and was ready to tear the caller a new one when he explained, I'm calling about the caregiver role. 4 Granger Manor. Those words chased the sleep out of my eyes. I sat up straight. Me and my girlfriend were saving up for our wedding. But with only 10 months left, we needed every penny we could get. I needed a part-time job and I needed one fast. But finding a good, decent job these days was like finding water in the Sahara. So it's no surprise that I applied for this caregiver vacancy 2 minutes after it went live on Indeed. We like your CV and would like to invite you for an interview, the caller continued. His voice was soft, silky smooth. So smooth it was almost unnerving. He sounded like one of those ASMR YouTubers. Would you be free tomorrow morning? 8:30 a.m., to be exact. I didn't miss a beat. I'll be there. I never expected them to call me back half an hour after I applied. 11 at night, no less. But I just assumed they were as desperate for employees as I was to earn some money on the side. It was a match made in heaven. The interview was done over Zoom. The next morning I sat at my dining room table, hunched over my laptop, headphones pressed into my ears as I joined the call. The video call flickered to life and a middle-aged man appeared on my screen. He introduced himself as Damien. No surnames. Just Damien. He looked as professional as he sounded. Slick back dark hairs black as night, well-groomed beard, suit and tie. He smiled, but if there was even a shred of warmth left in that smile, it didn't reach his pale blue eyes. The corners of his mouth were pulled back just a little too far, revealing teeth that were unnaturally even and white, as if he spent a lifetime polishing them to perfection. He asked all the usual questions. What are your weaknesses? What do you believe are the most important qualities for a caregiver to possess, and how do you demonstrate them? Why do you think you're a good fit for this company? I bullshitted my way through the interview. I asked a few questions of my own too. There were barely any traces of the care home on the internet and I was curious about that. Damien glanced up at me. His smile never wavered, but his eyes held a flicker of something unreadable. It looked a little like surprise. Yes, he began, his voice measured and calm. We pride ourselves on maintaining a private and exclusive environment for our residents. Many of them prefer a more discreet approach, away from the prying eyes of the public. It sounded like he was reading from a rehearsed script. I ignored the red flags. Looking back at it, I ignored a lot of red flags. Money sometimes makes you blind. In the end, I got the job. I started work the next evening. I kissed Celine goodbye and was out the door. The place was a 45-minute drive from our house, in the ass-crack middle of nowhere. Frank Ocean sang his heart out on the car radio as I sped through the highway on a foggy night. The long road ran through the woods and I drove past miles and miles of tall birch trees that stretched up to the cloudy sky. All around me, there was nothing but forest. The care home was nestled at the end of a quiet street in a gated community. It was a small, old-school bungalow with neatly trimmed bushes and colorful flower beds on the lawn. I parked up, stepped out, and headed to the front door. Just as I raised my hand to knock, the door creaked open, revealing a tall man in the dimly lit hallway. Good evening, Damien said, with that smooth yet hollow voice. Alex, was it? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yes, that's right, I shook his hands. Nice to meet you. Something about the man gave me unease. Come in, he stepped aside with an almost mechanical grace. We've been expecting you. Anything to drink? Coffee? Water? No, thanks. I'm good. The door closed behind me with a soft thud. The tall man gestured for me to follow him down a narrow hallway, and with each step, the unease in my chest tightened its grip. The radio was playing softly in the background. As I listened, the crackly voice became clearer. We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming to bring you a special report. We have just received word that Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, has been attacked by Japanese forces. I repeat, Pearl Harbor has been attacked. Damien must have noticed my curiosity. You're probably wondering why we play old news broadcasts like this one, he chimed in, his voice steady. It's not just for nostalgia's sake, although that does play a part. It's about keeping a connection to the past alive, especially for our older residents. Now that he mentioned it, the entire house looked like it was frozen in the past. The furniture in the living room matched the vintage feel. Plush armchairs with floral upholstery sat alongside polished wooden side tables. A few framed black and white photographs adorned the walls, capturing memories from what seemed like a distant past, smiling faces at family gatherings, couples dancing at social events, a little girl building a sandcastle, a slender ballerina posing on her tiptoes. Even the light fixtures, with their frosted glass shades, seemed to belong to another era. The soft, dim glow they poured into the room added to the cozy yet eerie atmosphere. It looked how you'd expect an old people's home to look. There was only one thing missing. Where are all the residents? I thought out loud. Damien stopped abruptly. Apart from the ticking of the grandfather clock on the wall and the crackle of wood from the fireplace, there was no sound apart from the news reporter on the radio. He turned to me with that signature smile that was stitched onto his face, his eyes pale as snow. I must inform you that the nature of this role is quite unique. He cleared his throat. Alex, you see, the resident you will be providing companionship to is not a living person. Say what? The words caught in my throat. The individual in question is not alive. Well, at least not in the conventional sense. You will be tasked with watching over their ashes. He went on, this is an afterlife care agency. We care for those whom society had forgotten. Those who passed away with a dying wish to be remembered and loved from beyond the grave. Many of our clients are folks who died alone, with no one in their lives. No living husbands or wives, no children, no friends to mourn their losses. As he spoke, my gaze drifted to a corner of the room where a small, ornate urn rested on a side table. It dawned on me that the client in question was the pile of cremated ashes in that urn. We're understaffed at the moment, so we've had to outsource some of our work across the country. It's a rather unconventional responsibility, I understand. So, if this isn't what you were expecting, it's perfectly. I was on my way to the door before he even finished his sentence. Oh, hell nah. The pay would be $2,000 per night, he added, stopping me in my tracks. We've already wired this night's pay to your account. I pulled out my phone and saw the PayPal notification signaling that $2,000 had landed safely in my account. I don't even know they got my account details. That's how I started looking after Miss Ferguson's ashes. Damien explained that Miss Ferguson had died of a brain aneurysm. Right on that chair, he pointed. 3 weeks had passed before anyone noticed. The mailman came to deliver a letter one morning, and when he saw the unopened letters flooding the mailbox and smelt the stench of rot, he alerted the police. And there they found her body, slumped on that chair. No one was named in her will. Her only request was for her savings to be invested into her afterlife care, and for her ashes to be scattered at a beach. And so here we were. There were rules that I had to follow each night. Damien handed me a document that listed them all. Rule number 1, ensure all doors and windows are securely locked by midnight. Do not open until the end of shift. No exceptions. Rule number 2, if you hear the sound of crying, remain perfectly still until it passes. Do not, under any circumstances, make a sound. Rule number 3, do not sleep on the job. Rule number 4, do not look into any mirrors after midnight. Rule number 5, do not open the bedroom door at the end of the hallway. You must not under any circumstances break these rules, Alex, Damien finished. For the first time, the smile faded from his face. He was dead serious. Got it, I said. My schedule was the same each night. I polished the tables, vacuumed the carpets, dusted the bookshelves, and played Miss Ferguson's favorite songs on the record player. She apparently loved jump blues music, so every night I played Woogie Woogie Bugle Boy back to back. For the most part, it was a decent job. I had no supervisor, so sometimes I just laid on the couch, watching Joe Rogan until sunrise. Then I'd clock out at 7 a.m. Rinse, repeat. I didn't hear the sound of crying until the 4th night. I was in the house all by myself. I remained as still as a mannequin, my heart beating in my chest. Frozen, paralyzed by fear as I heard the sobbing. Sure, Damien did warn me about the crying, but I didn't expect it to actually happen. I strained my ears to listen, but the sound was faint and muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls themselves. Almost as though they didn't want anyone to hear. But then the crying got louder and louder. And then it was followed by the sound of scratching. Nails scratching furiously from inside the walls. That was the last straw. As soon as the crying stopped, I got up out of there. I left the house keys under the doormat and dropped Damien a text message that I wouldn't be coming back. My phone was ringing up a storm as I reversed out of the driveway. I put it on loudspeaker and pressed the gas pedal to the floor. What are you doing, Alex? There was no more politeness in Damien's voice. I'm quitting. Don't worry, I'll pay back tonight's wage. But I've entertained this crazy shit long enough. Mr. Adeyemi, you're making a mistake. Listen, I'm not spending one more night in that madhouse. There are rules. You broke them. Please don't call me again. Mr. Adeyemi, I urge you to. I hung up the phone. When I finally stepped through my front door, the familiar warmth of home began to ease my nerves. I collapsed asleep on the sofa. Later that morning, I stirred awake to the sound of soft footsteps. Celine was already up by 7 in the morning, her eyes full of concern as she gently shook my shoulder. Hey, she said, her voice a soothing balm. You okay? You look like you barely slept. She handed me a cup of coffee. I rubbed my eyes and managed a tired smile. Rough night, I admitted, the memories of the care home still fresh in my mind. She frowned, worry etched across her face. You don't have to keep pushing yourself so hard, she said, kissing me on my forehead. We can figure things out together. I know. I reached for her hand. I just want everything to be perfect for us. It already is, as long as we're together. She squeezed my hand and smiled gently. Just had my performance review. Been pushing for that senior product manager role. If I get it, it'll make things a little easier for us. That's great, babe. I know you'll get it. She probably noticed how distracted I was. You sure you're okay, Lex? From that point forward, I heard nothing more from Damien. No text messages, no calls. Radio silence. The job posting was no longer live on Indeed. And I didn't have the man's number, so calling him wasn't an option. I wanted to clear the air, to make sure he wouldn't break into my house one night and slip cyanide in my coffee. The silence was killing me. The uncertainty, the dread of not knowing what he was thinking. I drove back to Miss Ferguson's house, but there was no one there. Someone had stuck up a "for sale" sign on the lawn. It was as if the whole ordeal had never happened. For nights that were blotted out of history. Life went back to usual for the most part. At that point, I hadn't told Celine what had happened. Not about the special requirements of the job, the weird rules, or the muffled crying I heard from inside the walls. I didn't want to worry her. She had enough on her plates. Everything would go back to normal, I convinced myself. I was wrong. One morning, as I got up to brush my teeth, I glanced in the mirror and saw the reflection of an old lady standing behind me. I spun around and saw no one there. But when my eyes drifted back to the mirror, there she was again. Impossibly thin and frail, draped in a tattered nightgown, leaning on a cane. Her eyes were red and teary. She had been crying. At the office, I'd see her lithe frame in toilet mirrors. Her silent eyes were now dead, as though she had run out of tears. There she was in the corner of my bedroom at night, her silhouette lurking in the dark, walking aimlessly, drifting at the corner of my eyes. But when I looked directly at her, she'd vanish again. Everywhere I went, I'd hear the tap, tap, tap of that cane as she followed me. But she was invisible to everyone else. It didn't take long for me to start losing my appetite. I ate less. My eyes became sunken, hollow from the sleepless nights. I lost some weight and my face was gaunt. I stopped going to the office because I was terrified. I locked myself in my house and hid under the covers. That was the only place I was safe from her. I had no choice but to confess everything to Celine. She did what she could to support. She set up appointments with a therapist, stayed awake with me after my night terrors, took time off work to be around more. But still, I drifted slowly into the deep end of madness. We ended up canceling the wedding. But the torture didn't stop there. Soon I began seeing Miss Ferguson's urn in random places too. I stepped into my bedroom one evening, and there it was, sitting on my nightstand as if it had always been there. Each time I found it, I tried to get rid of it, moving it to the attic, locking it in the basement, even throwing it out with the trash. But no matter what I did, it always returned, undisturbed and pristine. And if it wasn't the urn haunting me, it was the old lady with that cane of hers. Tap. 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 Maybe she's trying to tell you something, Celine suggested one night. We were laying on the sofa together, as I ran my hand through her hair. Miss Ferguson was staring at us from the corner of the room. I tried to ignore her. Is she here with us now? Celine asked. Yeah, she's right there, I pointed to beside the dining room table. I could see that made Celine uneasy. She shifted slightly, her body tensing. Perhaps she just needs something to be at peace, Celine added, her eyes lingering on the corner of the room. Perhaps. I was suddenly reminded of Miss Ferguson's will. She wanted her ashes to be scattered at a beach. I might have an idea. That following morning, I stepped out of my front door for the first time in what felt like an eternity. I squinted at the blinding sunlight, feeling the fresh morning breeze on my face. It was a 50-mile drive to the closest beach. The open road stretched out ahead, winding through coastal towns and past towering cliffs laced with wildflowers swaying in the gentle breeze. Miss Ferguson's urn was riding shotgun on the front seat. The world outside my car seemed to slow down. You have a lot of time to think about everything when you're out on the road. And that whole journey, all I could think about was Miss Ferguson. I had so many questions. What did she do for a living? Did she have any children? Was she ever married? Why did she want her ashes to be scattered at the beach? I never cared to ask Damien any of these questions, but all of a sudden these things seemed to hold more weight. More value. Finally, the beach appeared in the distance, a stretch of sand bordered by rugged cliffs and soft waves. I parked the car and stepped out onto the sand, the grains warm beneath my feet. The wide ocean stood before me, stretching into the distance forever. The sun was still climbing over the horizon. I hired one of the small boats from the fishermen and paddled it out until I was far out in the calm waters. I sat there for a moment with Miss Ferguson's ashes. It was quiet out there. Nothing but the lapping of the waves, the faint cries of the seagulls above, the breeze of the wind. All you wanted was to be cherished by someone, I said to no one in particular. Then it all hit me. All of my emotions collided like a car speeding into oncoming traffic. The fear, the sleepless nights, the confusion, the numbness, all of it mingled with a deep sense of sadness. The sadness I felt for Miss Ferguson. For all the years she felt alone, isolated, forgotten. Tears fell from my eyes before I realized I was crying. With trembling hands, I opened the urn. I'm sorry. It must have been so lonely, so painful, I said. But this isn't where you belong. You can let go, you can find peace now. I scattered her ashes into the sea, and as I watched it drift away, I felt a heaviness lift off from my shoulders. I never saw Miss Ferguson again after that. I'm sitting here, freaking out. It's 3:17 a.m., and I just found my wife outside. This is going to be a mess, as I'm still shaking, but let me explain it as best I can. So a bunch of years ago we lived in another house. One night I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard noises coming from the other half of the house. I quietly opened the bedroom door and immediately saw a light on in my wife's study, which was situated next to the kitchen. The house we lived in was a few blocks away from the bad neighborhood, so my immediate thought was that someone had broken in and was going through the stuff in my wife's room, as my wife had come to bed with me several hours prior, and as far as I knew, she was still in bed. I crept through the house and was ready to confront the person in the room, when I realized that it was my wife. In my still half-asleep state, I just assumed she was still in bed. Turns out she had woken up, couldn't get back to sleep, and so went to her room to browse Facebook or whatever for a while. I had almost confronted my own wife thinking she was a burglar. Now, in our current house, we have a screen door and a wooden door. The wooden door has a deadbolt on it, and you have to make sure that you take the house keys with you, because if you close the wooden door, you're not getting back in unless you grab the hidden spare key or knock on the door/window to be let back in. So it's about an hour ago, I'm woken up by the front door rattling. I immediately grab my phone and pull up the security camera located right by the front door. To my surprise, I see my wife standing there, kinda shivering. It's definitely her, because we've been married over a decade and I know what my own wife looks like. She's dressed in the same clothing she wore today, a red top and black pants. 100% her. I don't know what she's doing outside, but she is. Confused, I roll over and there's my wife fast asleep. Remembering the incident in our last place, I use my phone screen to shine a light on her and confirm that it's definitely her and she's definitely in the bed. At this point I'm really confused. I get up and make my way through the house to the front door. As I walk into the lounge room, our cat looks up at me, half asleep. Normally she's super curious about stuff going on outside, and I would have thought that hearing the screen door rattling would have caused her to be at the door trying to see what's going on, but it's as if she hasn't heard a thing. I stand by the door and call out, "Who is it?" "It's me, hurry up and let me back in, I'm freezing." I went outside because I heard something but forgot to take the keys in my bag with me. That absolutely sounds like my wife. Accent, intonation, knowledge about where her set of keys are, everything. But I'm not convinced, because I've just seen her sleeping in the bed with my own eyes. "Hold on a second," I tell her. Now I'm heading back through the house and into the bedroom. I wake up my wife and say, "This is really fucking weird, you have to see this." I open the camera app and show her the front door. She's still at the door, looking around, wondering what I'm doing because all I need to do to let her back in is turn the handle on the deadbolt and open the door. My wife says, "What the fuck? When was that recorded?" I tell her, "It's not. This is live. You're standing outside by the front door. I just went down there and asked who it was, and your voice told me it was you and that I should let you back in because you're freezing and you left your keys in your bag." My wife gets up and peers through the bedroom window, as you can just see the front door alcove from there. She gasps and pulls the curtains shut. She turns around and I'll never forget the look on her face as long as I live. She's terrified. "That's me," she says. At this point I'm freaked the fuck out. I'm wide awake. I'm speaking to my wife, and I'm physically touching her while trying to peer out the window with her, but there she is, standing outside in the very outfit she wore today. Same hair, same glasses, same everything. We walk into the lounge room and I grab the big torch I have. It's a big sturdy metal super bright light, great for blinding people and hitting them if they get too close. We stand by the door again. "What's your name?" I ask. She tells me her full name including her middle name. It's correct. "What's your birthday?" She tells me. It's also correct. "What do we have for dinner tonight?" She tells me this too, and tells me that I cooked it. This is right too. I can hear my real wife standing next to me, trying to control her breathing, as she's scared out of her wits. I nudge her and whisper, "Ask her something only you would know." After a moment to steady herself and think of something, she speaks. "When we last stayed with my parents, what change had Dad made to my old room?" There was a pause. "Who is that?" the person outside said. "Why aren't you letting me in? You know it's me. You're starting to freak me out here. Who is that inside with you? Is that a recording of me? What's going on here?" I said, "Answer the question. What change had been made to your room when we last visited?" Another pause, then finally, There was a second bed added, as Max and Damien, my brother-in-law's 2 kids, sleep in there while visiting Mom and Dad. There's an audible gasp from my wife next to me. Now we're both freaked out. I grab her hand and lead her back into the bedroom and turn the lights on. We're still awake, watching the cameras. The other person walked towards the backyard, presumably to grab the spare key, but that was about 40 minutes ago and I haven't seen them since. I'm too shit scared to go to bed, because I'm scared that this person, who knew everything about my wife, will find the spare key and enter. I don't know who the fuck they really are, or what they want, but I'm not sleeping. I always smiled when taking my photo, but my photos stopped showing me smiling in them. Family photos were a rare and bittersweet ritual during my childhood. Once every few years, the process would unfold with painful predictability. We'd cram into our car, itchy wool sweaters and forced smiles in tow. The photo studio itself felt like a fluorescent-lit interrogation room, where Mom would fuss over our hair, the acrid scent of hairspray hanging heavy in the air. Those portraits, stiff and awkward, captured none of the warmth or authenticity of real life. They were mere snapshots of a moment in time, devoid of any genuine emotion. School pictures were no better. Each year, I'd participate in the joyless ritual of stare, click, back to class with all the enthusiasm of a mandated flu shot. High school marked a turning point, a time when my sense of identity began to shift. Gone were the forced smiles of childhood portraits, in their place stood an angsty teenager, rebelling against the mundanity of everyday life. Then came Instagram, offering a platform that seemed to demand self-expression. Despite my initial reluctance, my friends dragged me into its orbit, and soon, my profile became a meticulously curated gallery of artfully posed selfies. Head tilted at just the right angle, eyes fixed on some unseen horizon, each photo was a testament to the "I'm so cool" persona I was desperate to project. These staged snapshots, so different from the stifling family portraits of my youth, came to define my online presence throughout high school, creating a carefully crafted digital mask that concealed my true self beneath layers of filters and feigned nonchalance. My first job after high school was meant to be a temporary moneymaker, yet it ironically hurled me headlong into the heart of a bustling photo lab. The pungent scent of developing solution permeated the air, clinging to my clothes like a stubborn shadow, seeping into my very pores. Harsh fluorescent lights bathed the room in a clinical glow, illuminating the conveyor belt of discarded memories as it trundled along, lopsided birthday cakes captured in grainy stillness, chaotic family gatherings frozen in time, and the all-too-familiar forced grins of school portraits, each one a poignant reminder of my own awkward adolescence. In this dimly lit corner of the world, I bore witness to the fragile remnants of lives lived, loves lost, and laughter shared, all preserved in fleeting moments that seemed to dance along the edge of obscurity. The work itself was about as thrilling as watching the same movie for the 100th time. I'd punch in, submerge film canisters into their chemical baths, and battle the incessant temptation to scream my frustration into the abyss. The monotony was punctuated only by the sweet symphony of the closing bell, a beacon of relief in the desolate landscape of my workday. A few months into the job, our manager announced a new idea to offer customers personalized profile picture printouts. As she explained the details, she revealed that one of us would need to be the sample model for the promotional shots. My stomach nodded at the thought, but before I could fully process her words, the new photo booth in the corner caught my eye. It loomed like a judgment stand, its harsh lights bleaching the life out of everything they touched. Later on that day, as I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, my coworker Charlene's familiar and flustered voice pierced the lab's steady drone. "Hey, you have a nice smile," Charlene chirped, a hint of desperation in her voice. "Mind being our sample profile picture model?" Despite the urge to decline, I found myself nodding in reluctant agreement. The weight of expectation pressed down on me as I followed Charlene toward the photo booth, the metallic tang of developing chemicals mingling with the sterile scent of electronics in the air. I took my place before the imposing photo booth camera, its dark lens staring me down like the eye of some mechanized beast. I'd never considered myself photogenic, and the prospect of being the lab's sample model filled me with anxiety. "Say cheese," Charlene exclaimed. I forced my lips to curl, the corners of my mouth trembling with the effort. The flash erupted. Temporarily blinded, I blinked away the spots clouding my vision. Charlene's eyes narrowed as she peered into the viewfinder, her brows furrowing slightly. "You need to smile if you want to be our sample profile picture model." I did smile, I mumbled defensively. She gestured toward the monitor, and I braced myself for the awkward grin I was sure I'd see. Instead, the screen revealed my face completely devoid of emotion. No trace of my forced smile, no hint of tension, no spark in my eyes. "Let's try again," I offered, determined to rectify the image. I took a few steps back and fixed a smile on my face well before Charlene's finger hovered over the shutter button. The blinding flash filled my vision, and as Charlene examined the afterimage, her expression shifted to disappointment. "Now you're just messing with me. You didn't smile again." Certain I had held my smile even before the flash, I opened my mouth to explain, but she cut me off with a dismissive shrug, her focus already shifting to an awaiting customer. "Thanks anyway." I had smiled, that was a certainty, yet the camera didn't capture it. My mind whirled, conjuring up possible explanations, a faulty flash, a processing mistake. Eventually, I pushed the incident to the recesses of my mind and completed my shift. After a few months in the photo lab, I decided to enroll in college, hoping to find a clearer path forward. College bulldozed its way into my life, a tsunami of textbooks and lectures threatening to consume me. Juggling work and studies transformed into a never-ending balancing act, but I held on to the hope that it would all lead to something better. Mornings kicked off with coffee, a futile effort to ward off exhaustion from late-night study binges. Lunch breaks became hurried pauses, a few stolen minutes to gulp down sandwiches before racing to the next lecture. Evenings turned into a chaotic dance of homework, assignments, and the inevitable dash to my part-time job at the photo lab. In the chaos, one constant remained, my mother's unwavering mission to find me a romantic partner. To her, my single life was an unforgivable void, an indication I wasn't living life to the fullest. Family dinners morphed into verbal obstacle courses, filled with thinly disguised remarks and helpful articles about the joys of marriage. "Aren't you bored of frozen dinners?" she'd joke, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "Maybe someone special could make you cooked meals." I had dated a bit in high school, but no one ignited a real spark. Perhaps I was just picky, but settling for anything less than a genuine connection felt stifling. Building a life on my terms was satisfying, loneliness seemed like a small price to pay. Finally, I moved out to my own apartment, a haven from my mother's tireless, "find someone already," chorus that crescendoed whenever I was around. The tranquility was euphoric, a refreshing change from the never-ending barrage of well-meaning, or so she insisted, advice. However, as the novelty of independence wore off, an uninvited guest crept in, a loneliness that had been skulking in the background. It sneaked up on me during silent nights spent gazing at my laptop's blue glow or while passing couples ambling hand in hand, their laughter a poignant reminder of my own solitary existence. Perhaps, hidden beneath the deluge of my mother's advice, there was a grain of truth after all. With a resigned sigh, I tensed, my jaw tightening and my fists clenching involuntarily. Perhaps it was time to surrender, to dip my toes into the turbulent sea of online dating. If nothing else, it would at least give me a story to tell Mom. I downloaded the most popular dating app, its logo a tasteless winking heart. The sign-up process was its own gauntlet, endless personality tests, meticulously curated prompts designed to unearth my deepest insecurities, and the constant pressure to devise a bio that was funny, deep, and charming, all within a maddeningly restrictive character limit. And then, came the profile picture. Perching my phone on a nearby bookshelf, I set the timer, and hastily retreated a few steps, the countdown's incessant ticking slicing through the silence. The thought of capturing a decent selfie, one that wouldn't scream awkward, seemed as likely as stumbling upon a unicorn. Facing the phone, I mustered a smile, willing it to reach my eyes. The flash erupted, bleaching the room in a stark light that sapped all color. Relaxing my strained expression, I braced for the inevitable discomfort of the self-portrait. My thumb hovered over the image, and I tapped the screen. The image flickered to life. The image showed my face as plain as ever, replaced by a blank expression as devoid of life as a mannequin's. Resetting the camera, I backed away, this time keeping a smile plastered on my face as I waited for the flash. The picture snapped, and I checked my phone once more. The same unnerving blank expression stared back at me, devoid of any emotion. Desperate for this to make sense, I clung to the idea that something must have been wrong with my phone's camera. There had to be a reasonable explanation for this. I ransacked my room, digging out an old mini camera. I set the timer and positioned myself in front of the lens, forcing a smile. The camera clicked, its sharp sound echoing through my quiet apartment. As I approached the camera, my heart pounded, every step laden with anxiety. The screen confirmed my worst fears. I was a vacant shell, expressionless. But for the first time, I noticed something different. At the frame's edge, barely noticeable, was a shadow. It was vague, its shape blurry and undefined. I reset the camera and snapped another photo, making my face into an exaggerated grin. The image appeared, and my breath hitched. My face remained expressionless, but the shadow had expanded. It was no longer a faint smudge, it appeared to writhe and pulse at the edge of the frame. Panic surged through me, hot and stifling. I clumsily handled the camera, snapping yet another photo with a forced smile on my face in a frantic bid to make sense of what was happening. As I turned the screen to view the image, I nearly dropped the camera from what I was seeing. In place of the blank expression that had plagued my previous photographs, I was confronted with an image of myself standing there, my face contorted in sheer terror. The smile I had on my face when I snapped the photo had been replaced by a grotesque grimace, the corners of my mouth stretched unnaturally wide. My eyes, wide and bloodshot, weren't focused on the lens, unlike when I'd snapped the photo, but fixated on something beyond the frame, something the camera's wide angle had inadvertently captured. The shadow. It had assumed a more substantial form, distinctly humanoid, looming at the edge of the image. The image revealed a version of me that was at odds with the moment of its capture. It seemed as if the camera had somehow stripped away the facade, unveiling the genuine emotion that was meant to be reflected on my face. Drawing a shaky breath, I switched the camera off and made my way to my couch. I slumped onto the couch, my mind grappling for explanations. No logic could explain why my captured expression didn't match the one I'd worn when taking the picture, or why there was a shadow above me in the photo. Craving nothing more than to quicken the arrival of the next day, I went to my bedroom, forcing my eyes shut in a desperate bid for rest. At around 2 a.m., something woke me from my uneasy slumber. My eyes snapped open, straining to adapt to the darkness enveloping the room. The quiet was broken only by my ragged breaths. As I scanned my room, I noticed one corner of the room that seemed darker than the rest. My gaze fixed on that specific spot, where the shadows seemed to gather more densely. It was there that I saw it, a darkness so profound that it defied the gentle glow of the moonlight seeping through the window. This was not the usual gathering of shadows, it was an unnaturally dense darkness, seemingly churning and pulsating with a hidden, ominous force. From within that darkness, a form started to materialize, a face that mirrored the unsettling image from the photograph. Devoid of eyes, a mouth, or any discernible expression, it flawlessly replicated the blank visage that had supplanted my own in the pictures. Abruptly, the shadow writhed, its dark tendrils extending toward me like reaching claws. A gasp tore from my lips as I lurched up, the bedsheet tangled around my legs. My heart thrashed against my ribcage, a frenzied rhythm breaking the suffocating silence. I was truly awake this time. Fear clawed at my throat as I searched the room. The oppressive darkness remained, but the face in the corner had vanished. I stayed up for the rest of that night, bathed in the cold sweat of fear. I'm not sure why my photos aren't showing me smiling in them, but just to be safe, I'm going to try to avoid getting my picture taken, because I'm afraid of what I might see next.